During the conflict here, 17 civilians were killed by plastic bullets. 9 of those killed were children. Hundreds of millions of pounds have been spent compensating the injured of plastic bullets. Some of those injuries include lost limbs, paralysis, brain damage, loss of hearing, and blindness. None of those killed were involved in rioting. No member of the British Army, RUC, or PSNI has ever been convicted for any of the above harms. Sinn Féin MPs have added their support to the cross-party call for the British government to cease its sale of tear gas, rubber and plastic bullets, and other anti-crowd equipment. We have seen their impact in Ireland and more recently in the US with the attacks on the Black Lives Matter protests and in countries across the globe. The British government cannot be allowed to profit from weapons turned on peaceful protesters. As was demonstrated during the conflict here, rubber and plastic bullets are anything but non-lethal. There is no excuse or justification for their use, ever.
Today in 2020, the use of plastic bullets and rubber bullets, both historically and with the PSNI, is both a legacy issue and a current policing issue. In terms of legacy, 17 people were killed during the course of our conflict, but thousands and thousands of people were injured. And we know that because millions and millions of pounds were spent in terms of compensation to the people who were injured. But there's absolutely no accountability for either the deaths or the injuries that were incurred. In terms of us dealing with legacy now, all of the families are engaged in different processes, but there's no accountability. There's even been recent inquests which have taken place in recent times, which has found that those killings were wrong, and yet there's absolutely no accountability. In terms of our current policing, we have in the armoury the most modern forms of plastic bullets. They would be completely unacceptable as a form of policing to be used in any community, and yet they remain there for no particularly good reason. We see in America that thousands of those types of bullets were used against people who were demonstrating in another use of their use as political control, a technology for political control. As long as they remain in the armoury of the PSNI, there is always a risk that the vulnerable, the civilian population, will try once again. There'll be an attempt to politically control that constituency if they decide to demonstrate politically, or as in the case of what we saw during our conflict, even when there weren't political demonstrations and civilians were targeted. While those bullets remain, that's always a risk. They must be banned, both for those who died and those who were injured, but also for future policing and for our community to have confidence in it.
How many times must we do this to ourselves? Been on our knees a million times, asking for your help. Of all the answers that I don't understand, like I did not draw the firing line, but I know where to stand. Nobody told me, must have heard it on the news. People with nothing still had everything to lose. It's like running uphill. In the corner of a graveyard, a mother kneels to pray, in the memory of a son that slowly fades away. In this part of the graveyard, the sun no longer shines. There's no fences or barbed wire, but still she's doing time until she gets the answers to the questions that she asks. It's hard to build a future when you're haunted by the past. It's like running uphill. It's like running uphill. As the bodies hit the pavement, the world seen what you done. as the bodies hit the pavement. Somebody singing that we will overcome. It's like running uphill. And everybody gathered here on Central Drive is marching in the shadow of the truth you tried to hide. And every step that's taken is a breaking of your law, for your justice never added up to the murder that we saw. And time don't make no difference to the people that still care. In thousands we march the streets still knowing that you're there. It's like running uphill. It's like running uphill.
Plastic and rubber bullets have killed 17 people in the north of Ireland during the conflict. Many of the families are still seeking truth and justice. Plastic and rubber bullets are lethal weapons. Sinn Féin has been very clear and demonstrating throughout the conflict how these deadly weapons were as dangerous and are as dangerous as live rounds. We've called for them to be disbanded and not to be used. Many of the families of those loved ones who were murdered by rubber and plastic bullets have been trying to get truth and justice about what happened to their loved ones. However, the British government is telling many of them that they're going to have to wait another 40 years before they get disclosure. Sinn Féin will walk every step of the journey with those families in their search for truth. This is transgenerational. This isn't going away. This is going from one generation on to the other, and we support them on that journey, and we will not give up the fight until the families get the truth and justice they deserve.
How are you doing? My name's Emmett McConaughey. I'm the youngest brother of Stephen McConaughey, pictured behind me. 16th of April 1982, Stephen was here, very close to the spot when he was murdered by the British Army. The soldier involved in Stephen's killing stated at the inquest that there was no innocent bystanders when Stephen was shot. My brother was innocent. He was 11 years of age when a grown man in a uniform from the British government decided to end his life and shoot him point blank in the back of the head with a plastic bullet. Now, that soldier's name is Nigel Robert Englefield. He was questioned for 5 minutes by the military police, and he was questioned then for a further 2 minutes after Stephen died. Stephen was in a life support machine for 3 days. Our mother had to make a decision under advice from medical staff to switch off Stephen's life support machine as his life was inviable. That individual was responsible for the death of a child, and in total 7 minutes he was questioned. He stood by his original statement saying that there was no innocent bystanders. How can an 11-year-old child be guilty of anything other than being Irish and being in his own street? Today I still stand here and still call for justice for my brother. He will never be forgotten. We know who murdered him, and we will get our day in court. Thank you.
One trait that oppressive governments around the world share is the instinct to lie about the deaths of their citizens. We saw it on Bloody Sunday, where the innocent victims were described as gunmen and nail bombers. And we saw the same lies told about the young people that were killed at the hands of the British Army and the RUC by plastic and rubber bullets. Carol Ann Kelly, aged 13, going to the shops for a pint of milk for her neighbour, shot dead, called a radder. Nora McCabe, mother of 3, goes out to buy a packet of cigarettes early in the morning, shot dead by the RUC, called a radder. And of course, people who were held in custody here were also subjected to lies, told that they were inflicting injuries on themselves. Eddie Rooney, thrown out of the second floor window, Springfield Road Barracks. Brian Maguire, found hanged in a cell in Castlereagh, which was completely bare. The poem I'm about to read, In Detention, is by a South African apartheid activist, Christopher Van Wyk, who himself was imprisoned by the state police. It's a tribute to the 67 people who died in custody, and it's a satirical poem about the way the authorities tie themselves up in knots whenever they lie and try to explain the deaths of innocent people. He fell from the 9th floor. He hanged himself. He slipped on a piece of soap while washing. He hanged himself. He slipped on a piece of soap while washing. He fell from the 9th floor. He hanged himself while washing. He slipped from the 9th floor. He hung from the 9th floor. He slipped on the 9th floor while washing. He fell from a piece of soap while slipping. He hung from the 9th floor. He washed from the 9th floor while slipping. He hung from a piece of soap while slipping.
We would like to send our support to the families of those killed and injured by the use of rubber and plastic bullets. Cards and Heron fully support all those in the pursuit of truth and justice. We send solidarity greetings from Scotland, and we will do whatever we can to continue to highlight the campaign for the removal of these lethal weapons in Ireland or whatever country they're used in. Set the truth free.
When Paul Withers was shot in the head at close range, illegally, at Great James's Street, I doubt that his family could have imagined that there would be a file in his name, specifically in the name of Paul Withers, in the National Archives in London, that would be marked closed until 2059. It's quite shocking. His sister, who wasn't even born at the time, recently wrote in a letter to the Secretary of State that she would be in old age by the time the file would finally be opened. If we were to leave it at that, and we're not going to leave it at that, then there would be virtually no one alive that knew or loved or cared for or hung about with or went to school with or played with Paul by the time his file is opened. And we often make the point, try to imagine for a minute that there was a file that the Met Police had and were withholding from the National Archives in London on Stephen Lawrence, and that they were going to withhold that file until 2059. There would be outrage, correctly, in Britain, and there should be outrage here. Likewise on Julie Livingston, who was also killed with a plastic bullet, a child in Belfast. Her file is closed even longer, until 2062. And this idea of hiding the truth, of keeping the files closed, is a common theme that we see going throughout British history. At this moment in time, we're looking at a file on meetings between the UDA and the British government, and it was closed, and so we put in a Freedom of Information request. And as a direct result of that Freedom of Information request and the review of the file, they closed it for 100 years. And of course that begs the question, what was in that file? On the issue of plastic bullets, thankfully we're in a situation now where they're not getting used here, or the newest iteration of plastic bullets are not getting used at this moment in time, and we welcome that. But we see throughout the world, whether it's in Israel, Palestine, whether it's in Portland or in Washington DC or in Catalonia a couple of years ago, or in Hong Kong or elsewhere, we see police forces that are getting more and more militarised. It's not anti-Semitic to talk about the role of Israel in that militarisation of police forces throughout the world, and in the role of British companies and American companies in providing what's allegedly non-lethal or less than lethal weapons. But these are weapons that maim, these are weapons that blind, these are weapons that destroy people's lives, and these are weapons that, as we've seen here, on occasion actually kill people. And it's that militarisation of policing that we have to tackle, and that total lack of accountability. And what's going to the heart of that is also the issue of access to truth and access to justice.
Belfast streets I've heard it said, the shooting of children dead, taking lives hardly begun, plastic bullets, and We won't be kept down easy. We will not be still. We won't be kept down easy. After all you've maimed and killed. Young Caroline, she's just 12 years of age, shot down by Brits and bloody rage. We Julie Livingstone as well fell victim to their plastic hell. And we won't be kept down easy. We will not be still. We won't be kept down easy. After all you've maimed and killed. They try to drag us from our streets by taking life so young and sweet. But do they not know we will not be beat? That their violence is their own defeat. And we won't be kept down easy. We will not be still. We won't be kept down easy. Through all you maimed and killed. They try to make us toe the line by using every type of crime, but freedom won't be terrorized. No freedom struggle, criminal lines. And we won't be kept down easy. We will not be still. No, we won't be kept down easy. After all you maimed and killed. No, we won't be kept down easy. We will not be still. No, we won't be kept down easy. After all you maimed and killed. After all you maimed and killed. After all you